Hello everyone, this is Cameron Marceau with the Black Liver Project doing our first episode of Monster in a Glass. This podcast, I like to say, is not only history of cocktails, but history through cocktails. When I first started this, it was me exploring cocktails because I just simply didn't have the experience. But as I got further in, I realized, holy crap, there is a ton to know. This is really interesting. This is really fun. And being a lover of knowledge, and in particular history, I really started absorbing the histories of the drinks as well as the people who were immersed in them, so to speak. So this show has been around a little bit, but it's got new wings, new life, and we're rebreathing fresh life into it. But so if you haven't heard this before, welcome and enjoy the new format. Basically, it comes in two parts. We start discussing the background behind the cocktail, the people, the events, the histories, and sometimes just issues surrounding the drink and the times that they were made. So we convene and do the recordings for the cocktails, discuss the backgrounds to them. And then the second part of the show, we go to the Brixton, a bar in Andersonville in Chicago, and we work with the bartender there, Michael, and then we taste it and we give our impressions with the tasting team. We had considered early on making them ourselves. It would save us a lot of money, but then it's like, how the hell would we know if we made it wrong?
It's an art form, man.
So even though sometimes we taste a cocktail, it's not exciting, it doesn't please us, we know it's made right, it's just the damn recipe. But I am joined here today by Jason Kruse, who is our historian and researcher.
Hello, and I made the drink maybe wrong.
See,
Who's now fired from being bartender.
Jason decided to whip up our first cocktail, which is the Manhattan, and
I won't say that I made it wrong. I'll say that it's not as good as a bartender would make.
It's also using one of those bright red maraschino cherries, which
all they have.
You would be slapped so hard for doing
silly.
that.
It says in here, maybe it just says cherry.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
He's
I know.
going to the recipe.
What's the one that they
use nuclear
recommend?
cherry.
Well, now they use real maraschino, which are like these dark
Black
cherries. Yeah.
There we go.
We are also joined by my good friend Mick Lehman.
Howdy.
You're all professorial now.
Professorial, yes. I
He's-
have now joined the ranks of, what is it? Asprof.
You're
Asprof.
Yeah, I'm assistant. Cheers.
We'll drink to that.
Cheers to Asprof. No longer instructor.
Excellent. So, our first cocktail that we're doing is the Manhattan cocktail. Jason, what did you discover about the Manhattan cocktail?
So the first thing I discovered is that it is a clusterfuck of information on the Manhattan. It is probably one of the most well-known drinks, if not the most well-known cocktail. And there is, sifting through it, the information is absurd.
And that's one of the things that I've noticed about some of the more popular cocktails is that everybody wants a piece of that market share.
Claim it.
Yeah, and and it's really hard to find the true origin story. And when we originally did it, I was told things that I think were just complete malarkey, and I didn't do the research. I didn't have the resources. Now I do.
Well, when you go to school for mixology, is there much history, or is it just can you make this thing?
Apparently not.
Yeah.
I think that there is, but I don't think that they have the resources either.
Yeah.
I think that it's one of those traditions that is passed on orally, and through experience, and I was taught this, and this is what's true, and
Hence, like, it's almost a mythology when I was reading your information today.
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's what a lot of what you'll hear from mixologists, which is, I mean, I agree. It's like, it is a trade. I mean, it is pretty much a trade. You learn a lot on the job. You learn from your mentors. So whatever they know, you know.
But even to some extent, the stories that are completely wrong, still they have enough strength to hold on, and in a way they have their own power. It may not be true, but like like mythology, it still has some kind of a part in the story.
Yeah.
It's like this branch that you could prune and just completely ignore, but no, it's been around a long time, and it's affected a lot of people in their impressions.
Right, and the Manhattan, and this is disputed whether, and there's no way to tell, but people say it's the oldest known cocktail. That's the oldest known true cocktail, and that's going to be disputed for 100 different reasons.
Is it the oldest known that has the same ingredients?
You see, that's what Haig says. A lot of people say it's the first cocktail.
I would say
a lot of people say
old-fashioned beats it.
I would say that there are lots of drinks that beat the Manhattan. I think because I think because it's pretty simple and it has bitters, which a lot of people I've heard purists say that it's not a cocktail unless it has bitters.
Yes.
So
yes.
So if you
a cocktail is whiskey or bourbon, or I don't know. Can you do brandy with it? Maybe.
Well, you said Scotch too.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then you got to have bitters, and you got to have the sugar.
Interesting.
yeah.
And that makes a cocktail. The old-fashioned fits that.
Old-fashioned is super.
The old-fashioned fits
easy.
that, and it's got a lot of history. But I think that it morphed over the years, and that's why it's not the oldest cocktail. It's like, I think the Manhattan has the oldest cocktail that hasn't changed.
We'll see. And that's where I might question. I'm not sure that that's actually the case. And again, it's wrapped up in mythology. And it was like trying to sift through this information it became an obsession after a while because because the information is so fuzzy. One person says this, another person says this. And just when I thought, all right, I got a handle on it, I was like, oh, wait, I found something else. So let's start with the recipe itself, since we're talking about why it might be the oldest cocktail that is made exactly the same way as what Ted Haig says 145 years ago, which I'll get into the timeline later and his bad math. But so the recipe that he lists, which is pretty much the recipe that I think everybody nowadays is familiar with, which is rye or bourbon, sweet vermouth or dry vermouth, depending on whether you like it dry or sweet, and then Angostura bitters, and then, a cherry or a lemon twist. Cherry seems to be much more common. So you have that recipe. So I don't, he says 145 years ago, which would put this drink at 1864. I don't know where he's getting that date from. Most people say it shows up in 1874.
When's the book that we're basing it off of? When does it? So he wrote it when?
Ted Haig?
Yeah.
2009.
So he's saying 145
years ago would be 145 years from 2009, which would be 1864. See, I factored that in.
There you go. That's good math.
That's good math. It's that good math. So here's why it gets a little fuzzy with the information. The first known written recipe for the Manhattan, and this is, I've seen it online. Everybody says, "Oh no, it's this date. It was Harry Johnson. It was this. It was that." The earliest I can find it, and other people who I'm based on their research, I'm trusting it. Is 1884 is the first place it shows up.
Who's the oldest author of a cocktail book?
Jerry Thomas.
Jerry Thomas. Date?
1862.
Wow.
But
it's not in his book?
It's not in his book.
Wow. I would have thought that would have been in there.
I thought so too. And, I would say that there are close recipes that are kind of close. You could say, well, this is maybe it was a precursor. At a certain point, a lot of the drinks just start to be the same. There were limited ingredients. Right. You're mixing scotch, you're mixing gin, you're mixing, bitters, and you just call it a different name, and you vary the amounts. But the first place, and some people say, oh, it was Harry Johnson. Harry Johnson this is another one of those historical disputes. Harry Johnson, his first published book was 1882. But what he says is he actually wrote it in 1860. And then I can't remember the story. It was burned in a fire. Some crazy story.
The one copy?
The one copy.
No!
He wrote it by hand.
Yeah.
On a pile of napkins.
On cocktail napkins. And
all held together with a spindle.
He
Nice.
put a lit cigar on it, and then it all went up in flames.
So wait, Harry Johnson said he had the first cocktail book before Jerry Thomas.
He says that, but there's no proof that that's true. His first published book came out in 1882.
That's over 20 years.
Right.
Nice.
Yeah. That's coming from Harry Johnson's
Yeah.
own. It's in the foreword of his 1882 book. I was actually the first one that wrote a book.
From the mouth of a bartender, and man, they're always truthful.
Very
Totally.
truthful. They tell you exactly what you mean.
You should
You're
ask
beautiful.
ask the average bartender's girlfriend.
Yeah.
Just-
They're good at it. Just have another drink.
You need this drink.
It's liquid truth
Yeah.
right here,
Go talk to that girl.
and trust.
Liquid True Trust.
They don't even need to say it. Come on, let's be honest. I never need to be told I need another drink. That's crazy. Of course I need another drink.
Liquid truthst.
This one's done.
So the earliest recipe, and I found it in two places, both 1884. I've not been able to determine which one in 1884 came out first. It's not even really worth trying to figure out. But so there's one recipe book called The Modern Bartender's Guide by O.H. Byron, and then there is a book by George Winter, 1884, How to Mix Drinks, Barkeeper's Handbook. Both have a recipe for the Manhattan called the Manhattan. Now, here's where it's a little interesting. So these are both the first recipes written down. O.H. Byron has two recipes. He has...
Wait, the first recesipes. There's
actually
two versions.
There's two versions. So let's go...
Go big or go home.
Yeah.
Well,
If you don't like this one, wait.
Oh,
There's another
it
one.
gets better with how many recipes there are, because as time goes on, and we'll get into that. Just things start to morph. But having these as the very first two written recipes. Let's start with George Winter's, because he only had one Manhattan recipe in there, which is Peruvian bitters, gum syrup, whiskey, and vermouth. So he doesn't specify Scotch. He's not using Angostura bitters, and he's using gum syrup. He doesn't specify the type of vermouth either. So that's where I'm going to start there, as if this is the oldest known written recipe, then it technically isn't the same recipe if Haig's saying, oh, it's the same exact one over time. Not exactly. I mean, that could change the taste. The other, and then in the Byron book, you have dry vermouth, whiskey, Angostura bitters, and gum syrup. But then he also has whiskey and sweet vermouth, bitters, and curacao. It's kind of distinguishing between the dry and the sweet versions of the Manhattan.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So, again, it's like, well, these are the oldest known written recipes. So already that statement saying it's exactly how it was when it started is not true, because they're already varied their recipes.
So you're saying somewhere there was one that probably inspired these versions, maybe? Before they got written down?
Yeah, and that tends to be the case when...
Makes sense.
I think in all of these recipe books, even Jerry Thomas's book in 1862, there's a lot of statements he makes like, oh yeah, I heard that this is the way it was made. So, people were making cocktails before that.
For sure.
Jerry Thomas was the first one to write
Do they
it
all
down.
have gum syrup?
A lot of them.
That was something that happened in that time period. It was something that distinguished a cocktail. It was primarily done for silkiness, for mouthfeel.
Mouthfeel, yeah.
Oh my God, we just had a
Mouthfeel.
whole thing about mouthfeel in Portland. It was the first time I heard it. I don't understand what it means, and it became a joke.
It's kind of creepy.
Yes.
Mouthfeel.
How does your mouth feel?
Yeah.
Oh.
Get out of my mouth.
But it was something that would be more popular with the upper crust of it, as it were.
Yeah.
So.
Well,
so,
and depending on what the majority is with the whiskey or the rye, it could bite you pretty bad, so they might want to chill it down.
Yeah. Yeah, and especially the type of whiskey it is.
This was made in my armpit. Just drink it.
I made it myself. So those are the first two written ones. After that, you find Harry Johnson puts it in his 1888 edition of his book. And he has a recipe for gum syrup, bitters, which he says Bokers, genuine only, Curacao, whiskey, vermouth. But he also says in place of Curacao, absinthe. And I'm like, I'm not sure that those two are interchangeable, but hey, what do I know? Maybe you can. He also says, leave it to the customer to decide whether to use absinthe or not. And this drink is very popular at present day. So it's like, okay, 1888, it's popular. Great. It's giving us a little bit of a timeline. Yeah. It also shows up in his 1934 version of his book. It's essentially the same recipe. I just put it in there just to see. Because I was trying to figure out, did he morph it over time as well? That's a good almost 50 years. Is that 50? Now I'm doing bad math. Let's say 40-something years later. And some of his recipes that I've seen do vary from one edition to the next. That one stayed the same. And then just to give you ideas of some different recipes I found through the late 1800s into the 1900s, you start to see similar ingredients, but they're changing brands. You have he says Peychaud's bitters, but it's Peychaud's, this is from the 20th Century Guide for Mixing Fancy Drinks, 1900. The Flowing Bowl bitters calls for absinthe and vino vermouth. A little maraschino may be added.
The Flowing Bowl, though, that guy was kind of weird. He had the more twisted recipes.
Oh right, that was the guy who had would put as many ingredients in a drink that he could find, right?
Yeah, and usually small amounts, just like a thimbleful.
Oh, there was that one that had like 15 ingredients, and it was.
He was like the only Schmidt. Yeah. William, the only Schmidt.
I think that was the same guy.
I think that, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So, but yeah, that one, I think.
But it's similar. I mean, you have absinthe, and you have just 2 years. No, actually, this is a few years after Harry Johnson's book. I should also specify that these guys ripped off each other's recipes and printed them. Like, sometimes the wording in one book to the next is exactly the same. You're like, oh, you just copied that and put it in. I've said it before. They didn't really give a shit about copyright. They didn't have any reason to fear it. So, so then you get into 1895. George Kapler, which is Modern American Drinks, is a pretty famous book as well. Now you have 3 different recipes. So you have the Manhattan, which he calls for Peychaud or Angostura bitters, gum syrup, Italian vermouth. This is the first time I'm seeing where they say Italian. And then whiskey, also still not specifying Scotch or, rye or bourbon. I'm getting into, I'm mixing up my whiskeys. And then he has a recipe for dry Manhattan, where it's leaving out the syrup and the cherry, and then extra dry, where you leave out the syrup and cherry and use French vermouth in place of Italian. This is only 10 years after the first written recipe, so already they're starting to change things.
So it must have been pretty popular even by this point then, if people are varying it so much.
There's another one from 1906, and I just pulled this out because this is the first time I could find where they actually specified rye or bourbon. Before it was just whiskey. Which typically didn't... I mean, it could have been Scotch, it could have been Irish, it could have been bourbon, it could have been rye. They also specify Italian. And then a dry Manhattan again with rye whiskey and French vermouth. So it goes on and on. I even found something in 1913 from Straub's Manual of Mixed Drinks with a Manhattan Junior.
The Junior.
I didn't know what that
on the scene.
It has an orange peel. I was like, is that for junior drinking for little kids?
You put it in their bottle.
Right.
Yeah.
Get that kid a Manhattan.
Yeah.
It's a little nighttime.
I don't know. He needs an orange peel in there. He might not be able to handle it.
He's got scurvy. Give him an orange peel.
I'm right as rain.
Yeah.
But I can't see. So has the heart and soul always been some kind of whiskey with vermouth?
Vermouth, bitters,
and whiskey. Yeah. So
Interesting.
then, but you see gum syrup, you see curacao, the type of bitters changes. It's not totally clear. I thought I was going to see a progression from the beginning to, and maybe they just add more things, and then maybe over time it just went back to the original, and it's just all over the place. I put in one of my favorite books. You always say I have a man crush on him, Patrick Duffy. Patrick
With a
Gavin
name
Duffy.
like that. How could you
Right,
not?
I know.
Well, it's
Seriously.
his full name, Patrick Gavin Duffy.
Oh my gosh. I can't handle it.
Patrick Gavin Duffy.
My pantaloons just came undone.
I like the book because it's one of the first books post-Prohibition.
Oh, nice.
And so it really gives a sense of how cocktails changed, which they did a lot over Prohibition. But he has Manhattan cocktail dry and sweet. And he says whiskey, vermouth, Angostura bitters.
Okay. Now, if we could just look at what the recipe is today, the one that we're looking at as the Manhattan recipe, who has the closest version?
Who has the closest version?
And when was it created?
So the one closest to today, it would be the original. I mean, those are the ones, aside from the gum syrup, it's exactly the same. It's whiskey, it's vermouth, it's bitters, and they add gum syrup, but everybody did. I mean, they added it to pretty much everything at that time period. And as you were saying, it's to give it a little more
Silky mouthfeel.
silky mouthfeel.
I think I knew a pimp named Silky Mouth.
I just found my new name.
Now, is it supposed to have orange flavor to it, or is that was up to the bitters that was added, or how does that work?
It doesn't really, I mean...
I don't think so. I think that, you can add an orange bitters.
Yeah.
The curacao that some of the recipes had, there's some orange. You could put a slice of orange in there, like a wheel of orange. I think that there's all of these variations, but when you're talking about a Manhattan, you're just going to look at the core.
Yeah.
And it's, whether it's French vermouth or Italian vermouth, there's the vermouth. Whether it's Peychaud's bitters, Angostura bitters, it's the bitters. It's
So
there.
I'm going to play the layman card here.
Okay.
And what is vermouth?
Vermouth it's like a fortified wine,
yeah.
but it plays more of a part in cocktails. There are people who drink it straight, but not often. And the name, and this comes into play in a big way in some of the later cocktails, especially in the story, but the name vermouth comes from the word vermut, which means wormwood. So vermouth was originally made with wormwood. That changed when it was outlawed.
More of a kick to that.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of background on that.
Cool.
In answer to your question, too, I forgot one of the things that I found. Another book that I tend to go to called Along the Wine Trail, which is a year after Patrick Gavin Duffy's book. I kind of use these a lot to gauge things that are post-Prohibition. He has a recipe for a Manhattan, which is vermouth, Italian vermouth, rye whiskey, dash of orange bitters, and maraschino cherry. But then he says is the real one, which is the one with vermouth, whiskey, and bitters. But he says orange bitters. Then you have another Manhattan. You have a Bartlett Manhattan.
Yeah, like that one. Another.
A Peter Dolan, a Tommy Lane's, and all of them it's like, well, this one has rye whiskey and French and Italian vermouth and orange bitters and an orange peel. This one has absinthe and gum syrup and just calls for bitters.
Who were these guys? Were they politicians or fighters or something?
You're right.
Both?
I don't know. I mean, like, yeah. That's Tommy Lane.
Peter Dolan.
A lot of these recipes.
Tommy Lane.
Yeah, Tommy Lane's coming after you.
When you come across these recipes where there's it's like one guy and it's the only recipe ever, you're like, it's just a fucking friend of it.
That's his
it was
buddy.
like, he's like, make me a Manhattan, make it this way.
What do
Put
you want
absinthe in it. Fine, it's a Peter Dolan.
There you go.
Good job, asshole. Now
That's
you have
his
a drink
legacy.
name.
That's all he had.
Right, I know.
Nowadays, it'd be like Peter Dickhead. Peter Dickhead Manhattan. Fine. You have a drink named after
You want a drink
Fine.
named after you? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a Peter Dickhead.
Mr.
douche.
Penis.
Tommy Lickballs, Manhattan.
It's got a nice ring to
It
it.
does actually.
It sounds very refreshing. It sounds like mouthfeel.
Yeah, what a mouthfeel there.
So I put all of these different recipes so you can get an idea of the variations that you're seeing over time, and not even in a long amount of time. I mean, even from the first written recipe into the early 1900s, you have all these different variations on it. So which is the real recipe? So as I said, we're putting it at 1884. Haig so he says 145 years ago, which would be 1864. Now, even if he made a mistake and he just messed up the math and he meant 1874, which is something you will find online, I can find no explanation where anybody got 1874.
It seems like they just picked it out of the hat.
I see things where they say 1870s, and I think that's fair. But 1874, people are like, yeah, it was created in 1874.
1864 makes me think he's giving Jerry Thomas the...
Jerry Thomas did not have a Manhattan recipe. And in fact, to even go further than that, Jerry Thomas didn't even have any drinks with vermouth in it. In his
Really?
Wow. Vermouth does not show up in Thomas's book, and it only shows up in Harry Johnson's book once. Harry Johnson's 1882 book. So after that, you start to see the vermouth show up. I didn't get to find out why that was. I'm not sure that there was a reason. It could be that I was reading something where somebody said, oh, well, 1869, they were first able to bring Italian vermouth to the United States. But that's still a long stretch of time where you're not seeing it. But maybe if people were still, it was exported to the United States at that time for the first time, maybe people were still drinking it as like an aperitif. They weren't really, or digestive, I don't know which one they would drink it for, but that they were drinking it on its own rather than mixing it with cocktail. So, looking at the earliest written recipes is really what we have to go with here. So we have the staples. We have vermouth, we have whiskey, we have bitters. But then you see, and you have the curacao, you have orange bitters added as a sweetener, so maybe there was a difference between the dry and the sweet. I found an article in the Chicago Daily Tribune, 1885, May 31st, and this made me think that maybe the first recipe actually was, and it's not definitive, but made me think that maybe this was actually the one with more ingredients, with the curacao and orange bitters. It's talking about Adolf Sonnenthal. So he was he had German-American friends. He was from Germany. He came to have some drinks, and then he had a Manhattan cocktail. And he says it's composed of half a dozen ingredients. Well, that doesn't fit the whiskey, vermouth, bitters. So there's clearly
maybe they had bad math too.
They had the
early Americans were not great at math.
This guy was German, though.
Yeah, they were always good at math.
He had really good math.
And the drinking. So
actually, I'm sorry. He's Viennese. So,
okay.
He's Austrian. So, well, whatever. He's European, so he had good math. I think that...
No, it's a good point.
It's not definitive, but it is... I like that he also calls it a veritable Yankee nectar.
Wow, so it's pretty ubiquitous then. Right. So it was all over the place.
Yeah. So the half a dozen ingredients is kind of curious. I'm not sure that actually means it was the original recipe, but it was at least that recipe was around in 1885. So right around the time that the first books were written.
What about the name?
So the name, I think most people just assume it was named after Manhattan, which I always thought so too. I was like, well, it's just named after Manhattan.
Do you know what Manhattan means?
Cocktail?
No. Island of many hills.
Really? Did they chop them all down?
It's the Lenape language.
Bead thieves?
Yes, the bead thieves. Actually, Manhattan was originally sold to the Dutch for $1,050.
Wow, that's cheap.
In goods.
You can't even rent anything.
That's
a cab fare.
And that's in today's currency.
Wow, that's nuts.
So it was
$10.
Yeah, it was I
think $10 and we won't kill you.
Yeah.
Please leave.
Yeah.
Here you can have this $1,000 worth of bread and plague blankets and
And here's your smallpox and your $10.
Now go. We took your hills.
Yeah, exactly.
What fucking hills are in Manhattan?
There used to be a lot. They did a deconstructive kind of thing. They were looking at the natural springs or something on Manhattan, or some show I was watching on History or one of those Discovery channels. It was phenomenal to see the landscape.
It's just,
you wouldn't even notice
it's totally been subsumed.
Oh, they just race it flat so they can build the crap out of it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's terrible.
Have you ever been to Manhattan?
Mm-hmm.
Have you been to Manhattan?
Yes, I have.
I've never been to Manhattan.
Yeah.
I hated it.
I didn't like it either. It was one of the only times I've gotten claustrophobic.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. I also will say that, to me, I guess I'm spoiled. I was like, oh, it's like a big Chicago.
Yeah.
Like, there was no difference of, like, it's dirty, there's big buildings.
The
And
sense
people
of
are
history
dead.
is cool, just like Chicago.
Sure.
I mean, coming from Alaska, everything if I go west is new, or not new to me, but old, very old. You know.
Yeah.
So going there and things that happen there, especially for jazz and all that, but the amount of people was just freaking me out.
Mhm.
It's that much more. Times
Wow.
3
All
or
on
4
top
or
of
5,
each other.
yeah. It's a lot of folks.
But it's not named after Manhattan.
What?
That's not...
How could this be?
Yeah, I know, right?
Wait. You're pushing too far.
That's its name, man.
How can it not?
Well, okay.
It was-
technically, I guess it's named after Manhattan. Where it started and why the name is also disputed a lot. It's really impossible. I'll just start by saying it's almost impossible to find out who really came up with the first drink. The information is just vague. It's a lot of hearsay. One that I heard and I was like, that sounds like bullshit. Like that was like the first thing I read. I was like, I just want to get an idea what people on the interwebs are saying about where it started. So I took this as a quote from Wikipedia, and I picked Wikipedia because it sounded like bullshit anyway. I think even this person said, that's questionable. Popular history suggests that the drink originated at the Manhattan Club in New York City in the early 1870s, where it was invented by Dr. Ian Marshall for a banquet hosted by Jenny Jerome, who was Lady Randolph Churchill, Winston Churchill's mother, in honor of presidential candidate Samuel J. Tilden. And I was like, that sounds like a whole bunch of bullshit. There were too many people, too many names, and for something that I knew even before researching it was a disputed drink, I was like, there's no way somebody has written down in history, well, yes, it was created in this place. So I don't even know, I couldn't even find where that story originated, other than somebody named Dale DeGroff, who goes by the name of King Cocktail. And
he's a big name in cocktails.
Yeah.
He's a big name, but he wrote a book apparently, and he made this claim. I couldn't get a hold of his books. I don't know where he got his sources from, but other people have said that's bullshit. That's not true. And the main reason they give is they say, well, Lady Randolph Churchill was in England at the time that they say this drink was created, which he says. I think maybe that's where people get 1874 from. So they say 1874, this banquet happened. She was there, but she was in England giving birth to Winston Churchill. So
okay, so yeah, that does sound like like
it's
crap.
too elaborate.
So a lot of people say, it's like that's their main claim. It's like she wasn't even there. She was in she was in England at the time, and so I
profoundly pregnant
and profoundly right because he was born.
Well, that didn't stop anybody before.
Right. Well, they don't give a month on it, but Winston Churchill was born in November 1874, which meant she was pregnant through the entire 1874. It was unlikely she was drinking cocktails in New York at the time. Possibly, let's just say it's always a possibility.
Maybe at a New Year's party.
Yeah, right. Yeah, maybe she was a booze hound, and that's how he ended up so successful. I don't know. So let's just say this is true. Let's say this story is true. Mm-hmm. Let's figure out why it wouldn't be true. Well, Samuel J. Tilden was the Democratic candidate in the 1876 presidential election. So when people say 1874 and it's to this banquet and Lady Randolph Churchill was there, he was nominated in 1874 and he didn't even start campaigning until 1875. So it's already, I'm like, this doesn't sound... I couldn't find anything that talked about a banquet in his honor. I couldn't find anything about...
His nomination banquet.
There it is. Tilden is the father of Winston
Churchill.
we
figured it out.
Of Winston Manhattan Churchill.
His name is Winston Manhattan Tilden Churchill. Yeah. So
that seems far-fetched.
Yeah, I mean, it's just there's too much going on. Plus, they say it was at the Manhattan Club, which, by the roster I saw in a history of the Manhattan Club, it was all men. I'm not sure how many women were gracing the entrance.
Well, they knew that she had Winston Churchill.
Right.
Her. Yeah, they all had time machines.
They were like, all right.
They're like, he can drink.
Yeah.
That motherfucker can drink. Yeah. He can
we
come
gotta
in.
get him started.
Even...
Let's do it.
In the embryonic stage,
right.
she can come in.
We know
she's
he's
got
a
wisdom.
She's good.
head.
Her fetus
Yeah.
vouches for
She's
her.
the only one, though. Get rid of all the other women. I couldn't tell if women were even allowed. What the Manhattan Club, really was it was kind of a political men's club for Democratic, the Democratic Party. It was a place. It was not a headquarters, but it was just as good as a headquarters. It's where they did their, I don't want to say plotting, but their planning of like who are they going to nominate, who's who do we want to push to the front of this, and they worked really hard. Now I'm looking around trying to make any connection to the Manhattan Club, Manhattan Cocktail. Come up with a name, Colonel Henry Watterson, who I found in multiple articles. He says Manhattan Cocktail was created in the Manhattan Club. He doesn't give any more detail than that. Every article.
What else do you need?
Everybody's just putting the same thing. He says, no, it was created in the Manhattan Club. All right.
Thanks,
Okay.
Colonel.
This guy says it was.
So is there any reason to say it couldn't be?
No. I'll say that. It's completely plausible that it was created in the Manhattan Club. But there's no details, and that's why it's like I can't say it is, and I can't say it isn't.
And the oldest recipe we have, the time frame on that is
1884.
And the club was around then?
It was. It started in 1865, right after the Civil War. And it was kind of, in the history that Colonel Watterson, so Colonel Watterson was a journalist, Kentucky journalist, and he was a big Democrat. He was kind of around and like getting these presidential candidates up and famous. So he wrote a history of the Manhattan Club. I searched that thing for every detail looking for cocktail, Churchill,
Wow. So you
Marshall, and in this
you had a
book,
history of a bar from a journalist?
well, the Manhattan Club wasn't a bar.
Well, still, but
he was one of the founding members.
Wow.
And he
Okay.
was a big name in this club, so he knew from the beginning. So he was the one that pushed really hard to get Tilden the Democratic nomination. So he says that it is, but he's saying this in 1915 when he wrote his book. But I couldn't find anything that connected the cocktail at all. So I was like, that's so weird, like if this was a story, if he's going to newspapers saying that cocktail was created in my club, why wouldn't he put it in a history of the club? I was thinking like that seems like a big event. It's like if you're gonna go on record saying in every newspaper,
name. I mean,
right? Yeah, if it's like if you're saying
like it should be on their charge,
right? It's
their,
named after the club. It was created in the club.
Their coat of arms is the little glass with the maraschino. It's on the coat of arms.
I now have my coat of arms.
Yeah.
Maybe it just didn't have enough visibility at that time then.
It's possible.
Maybe it was still gaining traction, and Mr. Watterson's time was over before he even knew it was a thing.
And that's why I'm saying it is plausible, because if it was created, and I'm going to say it was created before 1884. 1884 was just the first time it was written down. Definitely it was created before that, even if it was 1883. There's a claim that a newspaper article that I couldn't get a hold of because it was in some like no-name podunk newspaper said for 1882 they talk about the Manhattan. So it's potentially older than that. So Watterson is making all these claims. I couldn't find it, but then I found an article where they were talking about the release of his book, this history of the Manhattan Club, and the newspaper article is from 1916, and it says that the Colonel's book is a dry chronological record of the Manhattan Club, and then it says Colonel Watterson has turned down many flattering offers from publishers to write his political recollections and his views of public affairs.
Wait a minute. His book came out in 1916.
It came out in 1915.
He had plenty of time for it to get traction.
Yeah.
For the Manhattan to get traction, for him to identify. Because like 1884, 1882 to 19, and how many versions of the Manhattan hit between there?
Yeah.
Like 45 million?
Yeah, I mean,
it's like...
it's possible though that that's the strange thing. 1915, his book comes out. 1915 is the newspaper articles where he's saying, "Oh yeah, the Manhattan Cocktail was started in the Manhattan Club," but it shows up nowhere in his book. So this is where I was like, "Well, okay, it sounds like bullshit." Like then he's just saying that. Like, why would he say that? By then, yeah, it was an established cocktail. It was showing up everywhere. So it says, only to reserve that intellectual cocktail, which will be served at the anniversary banquet with the other celebrated concoction said to have been served for the first time at the anniversary banquet 25 years ago, the Manhattan cocktail. So what I think they're saying is 25 years before 1915, they served the Manhattan cocktail at a banquet. That would be 1890, which means it's not the first recipe. So again, is this bad math? Did the journalist have it wrong? So I was like, I don't know. I don't know what they're saying. It's hard to tell. Everything's really fuzzy with this. So there's no definitive answer. George Watterson, I kind of skimmed through that book. It is dry. It's just really fucking boring. And he was from Kentucky, but he was weird because I'm reading his biography. They say he's a Democrat, but he was... If you put that guy in modern times, he was a libertarian by all... He was like, women, they want to vote.
Jay, the Democrats back then were like our Republicans.
I know. The parties changed, but it was like women if they want to vote, all right, but they have to do it in a different place.
But they have to do it naked.
And
naked.
And states' rights and people should be allowed to drink, but I don't drink. But people should be allowed to fucking drink. And I was like, this guy's really like all over the place. I know, yeah, Democrats were not Democrats like today, and Republicans weren't Republicans like today. So where does that leave us? Well, we still don't know where the fucking drink started, but I think through all of these different stories, we can kind of lay out a timeline here. Haig's wrong. It's not 1864. It's not 1874 necessarily. Potentially, but it could be. So we have Jerry Thomas's books, 1862, and the 1876 edition do not have a Manhattan cocktail. Harry Johnson's book from 1882 does not have a Manhattan cocktail, but his 1888 edition and his 1934 edition do. I found another book from 1884, no Manhattan cocktail. But then you have the others that were written in 1884. As I mentioned earlier, vermouth doesn't show up in Thomas's book or Johnson's book. It shows up once in Johnson's book. Then you have the Manhattan Club, no dates given to any of their claims. It's founded in 1865, and I'm sure that the first thing that they discussed was not what cocktails they should make.
Our club should be named after.
I don't know.
What's the signature cocktail?
Maybe that's what brought all of them together.
That's certainly possible.
Remember the Fish House Punch?
All political history is based in cocktails.
Yeah.
But these guys don't seem like the type of guys that were... George Watterson didn't drink by accounts. He was not a drinker. He just believed that everybody should be allowed to drink.
It's easier to duel them that way.
That's true.
Yeah. What was his claim to fame? Was Maraschino Cherry Farms? Is that how he made his money?
Sure.
I don't drink, but put this in your Manhattan.
Yeah. We graded the Manhattan. Put a cherry in it. I found a menu from the Palmer House in Chicago from 1883 that had a Manhattan listed. So now we have 1883.
Cool. In Chicago.
In Chicago, which means... I assume the Manhattan started in Manhattan. Let's just say that's probably likely. But we at least have 1883. Possibly 1882 is mentioned in newspapers. And based on the way that, news traveled between cocktails, from what I've seen, I'm going to say it probably was the late 1870s.
Wouldn't it be interesting if it was a drink from the club, but they didn't call it a Manhattan, but when people were in Chicago, they were from the Manhattan Club with this drink.
That's certainly possible.
And it just kind of one for one. It was like, oh, this is the drink they drink at the Manhattan Club. Call it a Manhattan.
That's a good point. I didn't even think of that. By that time, we have another, 1876, 1880 is another election.
You've got some cross-pollination there.
That kind of will lead me into the next one. So I was like, all right, wrapping it up.
I'm done with this squirrel chase.
There's nothing that is definitive. And I'm just kind of poking around, doing one last final check. And then I come across this story in a book, that Along the Wine Trail book from 1935. And I go, holy shit! Are you... And then for a second I was like, did I just crack the fucking case of the Manhattan?
That's fantastic.
I was like, all right, let's just settle down. Because I was
Here he is. There's the guy who cracked the case of the Manhattan.
I was like, this...
Can I have your autograph, sir?
Dude, that happens to me daily.
It
all the time.
It does.
They're like, you sit on a computer and you look up stuff. You're awesome. So this story in this book talks about a bartender named Jack Henderson, who is from Maryland. And it's talking about a Baltimore Sun article that talks about how the Manhattan was actually created in 1846 by this bartender in Maryland. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Like, if that's true, not only does that blow, the lid off of this whole Manhattan story, but it also predates Jerry Thomas. It's like, all right, okay, I got to check this out. So I go on the hunt. This mention also says it's mentioned in Thackeray's The Newcomes, and it's mentioned in the Blithedale Romance by Nathaniel Hawthorne in 1852 and 1854. And I was like, oh, holy shit, okay, I got to go do some verifying. So I went and I found the article from the Baltimore Sun, which was from December 13th, 1908. I am so confused by this article. It is all over the place. And the guy's basically saying how the Germans are wrong. They say the first cocktail was invented in the Middle Ages, and they're full of shit, and it was actually a U.S. thing. But he attributes the first Manhattan to a guy named John Welby Henderson, who was a bartender at the Palo Alto Hotel in Bladensburg, Maryland in 1846. So he goes through this thing. It says, first, when was the cocktail invented? Second, by whom? Third, where? Fourth, who were present? Fifth, who drank the first cocktail? Sixth, who gave it its name? And then my answers to these questions are as follows. First, on the 17th of April, 1846, at 8:15 a.m., which I was like,
ding, ding.
Wow, they weren't fucking around. 8:15 a.m.
It was the fog cutter.
Right, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
John Welby Henderson, native in North Carolina. Third, it was at the Palo Alto Hotel at Bladensburg, Maryland. Who was there? Colonel Denmead Maglone, Honorable George William Mattingly, Member of Congress from Georgia, and Messrs. J. Upton Benson, Frederick G. Allison, John A. Hopkins, and then who drank it first? John A. Hopkins.
That's quite a cast of characters.
There's a lot of people.
Hang out at the bar at 8:15.
Yeah.
Right. Well, they had
the Honorable Judge.
Yeah.
They were still up.
Yeah.
This story just got.
They didn't go home.
Well, that's actually what happened.
Right.
They were still up.
Yeah.
Holy shit. Okay.
Oh no! Wait, was it? They were still up. No. It was. I think it was an early morning duel. So that's why they were there. So they were. The duel was between John A. Hopkins and Baron Henry de Vries et Chelonneau, who was an attaché of the French legation. And
Baron Henri de Vries et Chelonneau.
Right, and I was like,
that's good.
Yeah, you did that better. You have some French blood. I pronounce things like a white American. So they were dueling, and the writer of the article says, I don't know what it was for. Who knows? It was, some disagreement. So all these guys are there. There's also Chelonneau, let's say, was his posse was there too, because you had to have, if you had a duel, you had to have somebody who was the second in command to do whatever, hold your guns, hold your Manhattan, I don't know.
Defend your honor.
Defend your honor. Slap the guy with a glove.
Glove slap.
So apparently, slap that man with my glove.
I command it.
So the Baron was wounded, according to the article, by Hopkins. And Hopkins was a man of delicate perceptions, and the blood made him ill, so he went inside for a drink.
Wow.
Naturally. And it says, Jack, a man of resource, saw that something unusually tempting and powerful was needed. Grabbing up a champagne glass, he filled it half full of good old Maryland rye, and then seizing a bottle of bitters, he heaved in a few drops. And then he stirred up the mixture, bottle of syrup caught his eye, and he put in a swig. Then he pushed the mixture forward, and the first Manhattan cocktail in the world was born. And I was like, oh my God, is this for real? Like, this is a crazy story.
That's a very heroic,
go with that
I know, right?
Explanation.
And also,
he eyed the simple syrup. Right. The simple syrup caught his eye, and he heaved a couple of drops of bitters into the...
Yeah, they make it sound like he was like sweating, and he was like...
Right.
Wearing a cape.
Mix master.
Wearing a cape. Oh, he was totally wearing a cape. They all wore capes, didn't they?
Yeah.
I mean, that was what it was.
So I started with, then he goes on to say, well, it's in this book, it's in this book, it's all of these authors talk about it. Kipling and Ibsen was known to drink Manhattans all the time. And I was like, all right, let's go for this. Let's see where...
You blew the lid off it.
So I go to the 1852 version of the Blithedale Romance, which is what he says, where it shows up. And I search for Manhattan, whiskey with a Y and no E, rye, bitters, syrup, drink, cocktail, nothing. There's talk about whiskey, but it's people drinking whiskey, and that's it. There's no mention of a cocktail. Yeah. So I go, all right, and I go to the Newcomes, and I was like, well, maybe I'm just missing something. Go to the Newcomes by Thackeray, and I start typing in the same things. Nothing. Not a goddamn thing in there. And I'm like, how could he be like making these claims if it's... I mean, that's something you can easily check. And
not back then.
Not when you have the interwebs now.
True, right? Yeah.
This is still this article from like the Onion of the day.
Right. It was the Baltimore Sun. So then I was like,
oh damn it! Fake news. I hate fake news.
You caught me again, Onion from 100 years ago.
Exactly. 100 years ago.
So I'm like, I'm starting to I'm getting really frustrated at this point because I'm like, there's got to be something. So he's talking about these woodcuts and that they're the Ohio Historical Society. And then he says that the woodcut to commemorate this historic occasion where the first Manhattan was drank was Timothy Pollard, who was an engraver from Washington, D.C., was hired by one of the dudes there to commemorate this. So I started looking for this guy. And that the only copies in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And I'm going through all this shit, and I'm like, I can't find any mention of any of these things. Like, this is just, like, there's no record, and I'm going through archive databases, I'm just, like, Googling this shit. I'm like, who was this? Like, you would think that, like, somebody would have caught on to this. Then I start going through, I'm like, wait a minute, let me start checking these names of all these people.
That were there.
And I'm running through... Maglone, Mattingly, and Mattingly specifically, George William Mattingly, member of Congress from Georgia. So I'm like, okay, 1846, member of Congress. Yeah. You can go to the congressional website and look at the historic member rosters from the beginning of Congress. Yeah. And I'm like, so I'm going through and I'm like, it's not in 1846, not in 1845, 1847. I'm like stretching out, I'm going to the early 1840s, 1850s. I was like, he was not a fucking member of Congress, all right. Like, and then I'm trying to find all these other people. None of these people fucking exist. Like, I mean, clearly there are people with those names. I was like, there is nobody by these names at all. So I was like, it was the fucking Onion.
Yeah, it was.
It was like, this guy was making up a goddamn story. And that's the only thing I can say. There is nothing that backs this up. Because then I thought, and then I'm like, fuck. How could I was like, I thought I had it. I thought I had like the story of the Manhattan. And then he goes, I was like, all right, it's bullshit. But then something caught my eye, and I was like, okay. So this bartender, he goes on to tell, well, after the war, which I assume he means the Civil War, he was bartending in Baltimore through the 1850s. After the Civil War, he took a job as a head bartender at the Fifth Avenue Hotel. And then he left for Europe in the 1870s. And I was like, wait a minute. So if he left to do this, and I was like, well, where's the Fifth Avenue Hotel? Oh, it's only like 10 blocks away from the Manhattan Club, which was on Fifth Avenue and 34th. Fifth Avenue Hotel was on Fifth Avenue and 23rd, in between 23rd and 24th. And the Fifth Avenue Hotel was a Republican headquarters. And I'm like, oh, and then, but then I was like, wait a minute. So I was like, let's follow this lead. There is nothing. This guy made up a really detailed bullshit story. Like, there is nothing that backs up this story.
Do you have anything on the author?
Nothing. There is no author name on the article. I can't find who wrote it.
Oh.
And then it just, nothing of it made sense. These woodcuts that he's saying is in the Ohio Historical Society, can't find him. There is no, okay, let's say this. People in the 19th century didn't really give a shit about citing their sources. Maybe sometime they would say, it was by that guy, you know that guy. There's nothing. There's no author. There's no detailed information. I mean, that's why I think the telling detail is saying that this guy was a congressman from Georgia at this time period when he clearly was not.
Right.
And
bringing the count or whatever the Frenchman.
Yeah, and which is the name. And then looking back, I was like, that sounds like a bullshit name. Like it just sounds, and all the names started seeing.
Does it follow the letters of the alphabet?
Yeah. It spells something. It spells like
gotcha, jackass. Yeah.
So
that's great.
I was very disappointed
That's
after
great.
that, but that's another story. And I did find a couple people who also found that same newspaper article, and they were going, I can't find anything that backs this story. I was like, all right, okay, so I'm not the only one that was.
What a great chase, though. That was good.
It was a very interesting story. Yeah.
Okay. So basically, just a lot of blind alleys. A lot of.
Yeah.
I mean, you've really kind of narrowed down where you think it could be. I mean, it could have been completely off the record prior, and it could be part of an oral history prior to the first instance in print. Otherwise, there's just no way to verify anything. The rest is like mythology. It's like, you know,
well, if it was so prominent, then I mean, it really is a mythology almost. You know, it's like if it is like water, then who invented water? Well, I don't know, Poseidon. Sure.
Yeah,
Some guy, some dude at the Manhattan.
So yeah, and it makes a lot of sense that some guy would write an article, you know, proclaiming the origins of the Manhattan, completely fabricating the whole thing because nobody's going to check. They're going to find the story interesting. Yeah. He's going to get paid. Yeah. And it doesn't matter. You know, it's like it's an interesting story and it's fun and you know, I have a flair for making up names of congressmen. You know, it's like so. Yeah.
I mean, the story is really detailed in a way that I was like, this can't be false. This cannot be false. But then when I reread it after going, this is all bullshit, I was like, oh yeah. I mean, like it's clearly written like a short story rather than a journalistic view. Although in that time period, sometimes journalists were very flowery in the way they wrote. But it was a dead end. I think a lot of things are dead ends, but I think we can put it probably in the 1870s. That would be...
That seems about right.
And, you know, if Jerry Thomas didn't have it in his revised 1876 edition, it's probably somewhere between 1876 and 1882, I would guess. And it could be at the Manhattan Club. It's one of those things where I can't call bullshit on it because it seems plausible.
Now, I've always thought of the Manhattan as like the cocktail of cocktails. And, I mean, other people have said that...
You didn't taste my Manhattan.
No, it's a flat and flavorless Manhattan.
Good. It was all right.
It
wasn't the cocktails of cocktails.
I don't know. I guess it's just an impression I've always had, and that's why, you know, I put this one at the front because it's always... It's one of the things that inspired the project itself. It's like, I've never had a Manhattan. Or I made it 40 years, and I've never had a Manhattan. How can that be? I didn't say that about anything else. Mm-hmm. I went straight to the Manhattan. And so, like, in that way, it really is a story of a cocktail. It's like, it is just the cocktail. There isn't all of this other stuff around it. Mm-hmm. You know, it's about how these ingredients were mixed and when it happened. And the name is just a place. I mean, it could have been made there. That isn't so special either. So, it in a way, it is just like, to me, the form of cocktail.
Yeah.
It's
the one that sets the mold.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's necessarily true. I know that there are older ones, and I know that there are things that maybe have had more of an impact.
But in our psyche...
Yeah, I think that it's one of those that hits, you know?
Yeah, so when you say, I'm going to have a Manhattan, people know what you mean.
And,
I mean,
and
like if you said, I'm going to have a French 75, people would be like, what the fuck is that?
Exactly.
Get out of my bar.
And I think that there's been mythology around that. Like, I think J.P. Morgan was said to have always had a Manhattan after the business day closed. He would leave, go have a Manhattan. Whether that's true or not, who knows, but it's part of the mythology. Mm-hmm. You know, it's men of power, you know, the big city. It's, you know, all of these things all swirling together. And it doesn't even matter if it's true. It still has this presence. It has this power in our lives and minds today.
Yeah, it's almost,
you know,
archetypal.
200 years ago, you know. Yeah. So, I guess, you know, I guess that's pretty much it. It is time to go... drink a Manhattan, over at the Brixton.
Drink a good Manhattan.
Yeah.
Michael
Not this
will.
flat, flavorless.
I'm sure Michael.
Not this untrained bullshit from.
Michael
good,
will
you
make
did
us
well.
Michael, I'm sure, will make us a very wonderful Manhattan. I'll tell him to hold the absinthe. So, okay.
I don't
Extra
know,
warm one,
man.
please.
The Manhattan. 2 ounces Old Overholt Rye. 1 ounce Carpano Antica Vermouth. 2 dashes Angostura Bitters. And welcome back, everyone. We are at the Brixton. This is the tasting team. I know that everybody's like saying, who the fuck hasn't had a Manhattan? Well, it had been like over 40 years before I'd had my first Manhattan, which is kind of the inspiration for the show. But now I'm redoing them. I'm going to have my second Manhattan now. Putting up a better presentation, we have better information, and now I've got an awesome tasting team to sit and drink Manhattans with me. To my left is Mr. Kevin Rotajczyk.
Hey, everybody.
And next to him is Ms. Rachel Rubin.
Hi. I'm really amped.
And next to her is Bethany Lang.
Hello.
And also joining us is Nicole Pizzini.
Hi.
Okay, who's had Manhattans before? Nobody can see your hands raising.
Yeah, this is podcasting, morons. God.
Well, this is the first episode, so we're not quite used to it yet. So, wait, so only 2 of you have had Manhattans?
I feel like I've probably had one, but I don't recall the experience.
You have a Manhattan kind of feeling?
I have a Manhattan state of mind. But yeah, no, I don't ever recall. I don't recall having one.
Now, the deal with Manhattans is, in our book, our vintage cocktail book by Ted Haig, he claims that it's the oldest unchanged cocktail currently around. And he said 145 years. Jay says no. He always is going to say no. I feel like maybe there's some parts of the story that are missing. So, to some extent, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. The Manhattan is not in the oldest cocktail book ever made by Jerry Thomas. I would have thought that it would have been there. I would have thought it would have been at the top.
Yeah, for something that's such a staple now.
Yeah. It doesn't appear until the 1880s.
You would think that a Manhattan would exist at the start of the cocktails, and it apparently does not.
Well, according to what I've previously explored, it seems to me like the old-fashioned goes back farther. But the whole idea of the cocktail, meaning a spirit, sugar, and bitters, that's what makes a cocktail, in the traditional sense, that existed back in the 1700s. But it's clear that that Harry Johnson and the other bartenders who were writing at the time, they had them in their books. They had several versions in their books. They would have them with orange curacao. They would have them with absinthe. So it's clear that it had made an impact somewhere, but we don't know how early. The true story is lost because no one knows really where it came from. And I thought that it was a great cocktail to start the show because it is so cocktaily.
Yes.
I mean, when you think of Manhattan, aside from a borough of New York, actually, I think if you say Manhattan, most people are thinking of a cocktail before they're thinking of a piece of New York. Yeah, well, some of them use an orange rind.
That would be good too.
There was one version called the Manhattan Junior.
For children. That's right, for cocktail for your child.
It used an orange rind So it's like the baby aspirin, maybe.
Yeah.
The origins of baby
It comes
aspirin.
on the kids' cocktail menu. Where like most things are like,
Back then the kiddie cocktails were like real.
yeah, and like only half the price.
Alcohol back
They're
then,
like
right?
half the
They're
size
just
and half
smaller.
the price.
Right.
They're smaller. It comes with a free toy.
Yes, right.
I think I talked about this before, but at one point, as it is now, the production of corn in America was and still is super, super high. But it was so much cheaper to distill your corn down into whiskey and transport it and like ship it out that way, to the point where there was enough whiskey in the country to give every man, woman, and child a pint of whiskey every day.
I believe that.
Every day.
and those children really need it.
Yeah.
Mine certainly did.
No ADD back then.
There's what?
There was no ADD back then.
Kids are just drunk.
They're just sloppy.
That everybody was. It's like, where's the benchmark? You know?
I mean, yeah, alcohol has become more taboo well, not taboo, but, if you drink a pint of whiskey a day now, you're an alcoholic.
No.
I'm a bartender.
You can make one, you can make two, so why make three when you can make four? I used Old Overholt Rye, 2 parts. 1 part of vermouth. I use the Carpano Antica. Whenever I use vermouth with you guys, I use the best vermouth we have. And 2 dashes of Angostura bitters. All right? 212, that is the Manhattan area code. You may have come across this in your research. A lot of people say that that's why it's named that. I don't disagree. I disagree. I believe that the phone or the drink was probably here before the phone. Having said that, it's 2 parts whiskey, 1 part vermouth, and 2 dashes of Angostura. Always garnished with the cherry. Our cherry is the maraschino cherry that's soaked in Luxardo liqueur, just for an added little aperitif. And this is what I'll say about the Manhattan. An honest drink, a true drink. Everyone likes them. You could drink them on the rocks. You could drink them up. It can be a dirty drink. It could be an elegant drink. We use that nice Carpano. We use a pretty mellow rye and Old Overholt, which is, again, very good, very inexpensive, but very high quality. But, again, it's only 80 proof, so it's not a knockout drink. And a lot of women that aren't big drinkers will have these. My grandmother's been drinking Manhattan since she could spell. So,
I do have to ask, though.
Yeah.
This does not look like your typical maraschino cherry.
no, ours is soaked in the Luxardo liqueur.
So are these different from those bright red monstrosities?
They're the same cherry. That's been soaking in liquor for a month or 2.
Okay.
Luxardo brand, yeah, it's a big jar. Yeah, it's they're like a bucket cherry. They're
Oh,
they're
wow.
amazing.
That's awesome.
They are
I know
delicious.
that they exist in the jar, and I know that these are really, really good.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about trying my hand and making my own.
Yeah.
Just to see.
Always try your hand at making your own.
Yeah.
A lot of fun. It's a process. Nobody likes looking in the fridge for something that needs to age. It's just like, how'd it go? I ate it by 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
But, so again, I'll enjoy again a classic cocktail. Nothing wrong with this drink. Any bartender's gonna be proud to make it. It's very difficult to screw up, so we also like getting the call for them. And again, bourbon's really trendy right now, but this drink's been around forever, and it was here before the trend. It'll be here after the trend. So.
Thank you very much, Michael.
One of my favorite things to do with my grandma is drink Manhattans and play Scrabble.
That sounds like a wonderful evening.
Yeah, we have grandmother-granddaughter moments.
What do the words get like near the end of the evening?
I tend to win.
Wait, does she have more Manhattans than you?
Hits grandma a little harder.
Actually, yeah.
I like your grandma already.
Me too.
Smells like a Manhattan.
Yeah, it smells pretty boozy.
Smells like
That's good. It's definitely a whiskey drink. There's no question.
I like Manhattans. Does it taste like whiskey and other good things? And I like all of those things. I think the general rule is you lead with whiskey and you add other good things. You're gonna get a good cocktail.
Stay tuned for more of Rachel's life lessons about alcohol. Because she has really good ones.
Like champagne makes it an anytime drink.
Have we put champagne and whiskey in?
Ooh. You would need something else. Okay, that's another show.
So,
We could try.
Kevin, as somebody who's never had a Manhattan, right?
I think I have had one, but I
Okay.
didn't remember.
Okay.
Really, I just remembered the name, and I was like, I'm pretty sure I've had it, but I couldn't tell you. Now I'm drinking it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Is this a memorable drink though? I mean, it doesn't make you go, "Whoa, what was that?" It makes you go, "Whoa, that's whiskey."
When I drink this, I feel like this is like a classic. Like this is like.
But if you had that next to an old-fashioned and a sidecar, do you think you could tell them apart?
I don't know because I don't know that much about the other drinks. I probably couldn't tell them apart, but I mean, this is great. Like, I just feel like this is just such a comfortable drink, and that's probably why it's such a classic. Like, I could drink 3 of these
And I-
and fall down, but I would enjoy all of them.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that people drank a little differently than we do now. I think they wanted to taste the whiskey.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a little bit less of that desire to taste the alcohol in the drink now. I'm sure that, I mean, there are definitely people who do want it. But I think that we've gone through a phase where... And we still have the fruity drinks and stuff that give something to everybody, you know.
So, go ahead.
Oh, I think like small batch specialty spirits are coming back. You know, there's a lot more small distilleries now that like they want the flavors of their whiskey or whatever spirit they are to be brought out by the drink. But it's true that you don't usually want to use really expensive alcohol for a cocktail because it does hide the flavor a little bit. I was making Manhattans out of some of my husband's whiskey that was too nice to make Manhattans out of. I was given a hard time about that.
It's a good thing you didn't add Coke.
Yeah, that would really ruin it.
You would have been outside. You would have been
Yeah,
like,
that
get
would
out.
be the
Get
best.
out.
How dare you mix my scotch with Coca-Cola? No, I did not do that.
I'm going to express an unpopular opinion. I don't typically drink drinks that do not have anything mixed in them. So I know there's bitters in this, but
And vermouth. The best vermouth, by the way.
that is correct. But but as we've been talking about, this is a drink where overwhelmingly you are tasting alcohol. You're not tasting any other flavors. You're tasting alcohol. And I don't think that's for me.
We've got our fruity drink person here.
Well, it's not even fruity. I feel like I would like this if there was a touch of like orgeat or something, just to give it a little bit of something else going on. But to me, while I totally understand the appeal of just it tastes like really good liquor, that's not typically what I would go for.
Actually, I personally agree with that. In my own taste sense, it's like I want to have lots of strange flavors swirling about. If I'm tasting the whiskey, then I feel like it's not enough.
Yeah.
You know, if it's a mixed drink, fucking mix it.
Right. Now, I'm mostly a beer drinker, so I can see if I were somebody who really enjoyed like craft spirits, where I would love this because it would really allow you to taste those flavors. So like, I don't want a beer that's mixed with six different things. I want just like a really good solid porter or a really good solid, pilsner, something that's just done really well.
Are you a fan of Pipeworks?
Yes. Okay, I love Pipeworks, but that's totally different.
Oh, well, you just said that you don't like the beers with like, 6 different flavors. That's what they do.
I know.
It's
but
like
They have cats.
what?
They
They
do.
have cats.
But what I'm saying is
They do. Yes.
There's a time and a place for everything, right? I mean, sometimes I have a real great respect for a beer that is hard work to make just as it is, without adding anything into it, right? So again, if I really liked the taste of whiskey, I'd probably feel that way about this. I'd probably be like, wow, this is such a great way to taste this really well-made, well-crafted specialty liquor.
I guess I'll take any of it. I'd drink the straight whiskey just to get that experience. The straight vodka just to get that experience. The crazy beers, give them to me as long as you can because I want to try different things.
Right.
Things like, how did you experiment? What did you do to
Right.
this? another IPA just doesn't excite me.
Yeah.
Though, sometimes I taste one that's just very different.
Yeah.
And it's all very cool.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be interested in ordering just a shot of Old Overholts for you guys to taste the difference between what just straight up rye tastes like.
There's going to be a huge difference.
Yes.
Because we have some pretty good rye at home, and I enjoy it, but it's a little abrupt.
It's rough around the edges.
Yeah.
It is.
Like, it's not unpleasant, but it's kind of like smacks you in the face.
This is smooth. This is
Oh,
smooth.
yeah.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. I'm gonna go run over to Michael real quick. Okay, so Michael brought us the Old Overholt, like Nicole told us we had to do.
And you listened to Nicole.
Well, when we were getting it, we Nicole, as she said, it's you try a Manhattan and it's nice and smooth and everything, and then you try the rye and it's like very different. And like saying that Manhattan tastes like whiskey is probably inaccurate.
This smells really sweet.
More accurate would be to say that the predominant flavor in a Manhattan is a whiskey flavor. There are other things too, but yes.
That's the rye face. That's the rye face.
Yeah. Cam
That's
just
the
tried
same
rye
face I
man
make at
face.
home.
Big old face.
Very.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, it's Kevin's turn.
Yeah.
Okay, so wait, so the Manhattan was
212.
Yep. 2 rye, 1 vermouth, 2 bitters.
Maybe they got the area code from the drink.
Yeah, you ever think about that?
Yeah.
Internet cocktail people.
We should rename one. We should rename one the Chicago, and it can be 312, 3 parts whiskey.
Actually, no, 773.
Whoa. And it's served in a pint glass.
So what did you think of the whiskey?
It's delicious, but this definitely takes the edge off a bit.
Oh yeah. Not a lot of
I mean,
heat in that cocktail.
And what do you think, Rachel?
This is good.
Okay, now we have to make Bethany drink it.
I mean, it's like fire. It burns when you drink it, but I mean, the flavor is great. I really like it.
You're right, it does smell sweeter than I thought it would.
Yeah.
But that's a trick.
It's deceptive. Sweet, sweet fire.
This is actually not bad.
It's like fire. It's good.
It's actually pretty good. Yeah.
But then try a sip of your Manhattan.
Try that again.
The Manhattan is just like so smooth after drinking that.
And you get the bitter.
Yeah.
You get the bitter and you get more sweetness out of it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I have never actually had whiskey just, on the rocks or something, just as a drink, and I would actually drink that as
Yeah.
Oh, this is straight rye with no
straight rye,
rocks.
yeah.
This is much.
Yeah.
Okay, now Michael's going to create a Manhattan Brixton style. With these more common cocktails, I feel like we should let the bartenders play.
I agree.
Michael seems playful today.
He does. I think this will end well for us.
Ooh, that's pretty.
Vieux New Orleans drink. 1920s, 1930s, I believe. Key ingredient, the Peychaud's bitters. Dr. Peychaud's created the Sazerac with the Sazerac rye. They bottled his bitters, the Peychaud bitters. It's a kind of a pinkish bitters, a little sweeter. It's a wonderful, wonderful bitters. It's been around for over 100 years, I believe. So the Vieux equal parts rye, and I use the Old Overt again, sweet vermouth, and I use the Carpano again, and cognac, and I used the Pierre Ferrand cognac. All right,
Awesome.
Real medium-bodied cognac. Then you stir it, a little bit of Peychaud's and a little bit of Angostura. So that's a big flavor punch right there. Those 2 bitters like that is a big flavor punch. It's a real mellow drink. And then a half ounce of Benedictine, which again is medicinal. So
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So and again, it might as well be absinthe.
Yeah.
Sometimes garnished with a lemon. I garnish it with the Luxardo cherry, which is also quite common as well. And one of the reasons we do that is because again, we feel like this is even a mellower version of the Manhattan. And I don't know that was its purpose or anything like that. A lot of these drinks have, lemon juice, bitters, and whiskey. This one just again, it's like you're just taking away a little bit of the whiskey and you're replacing it with Benedictine and cognac.
Another question. Can you make one of these perfect?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That would be great. Then we can kind of try it. Yeah.
Wait, what's going on?
So what's the perfect one again?
When you make a Manhattan perfect, that means it's half dry vermouth and half sweet vermouth.
And that's what Nikki was really excited about.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, after that future Algonquin.
All right, usually you have to be over 75 years old to order a perfect Manhattan. You know, I don't know what it is. It's a generational thing. Some people just do not like any sweet added to their drinks. Like I said, the dry Manhattan is a very popular drink in my father's crew. He celebrated his 77th the other day. So very similar to the Manhattan, obviously. It just took out half the sweet vermouth and replaced it with dry vermouth. So you've got 2 parts Old Overholt again, half ounce of the Gallo white vermouth, dry vermouth, and then a half ounce of the Carpano Antica sweet vermouth. I garnish it with a cherry, just stirred it gently. Again, a very mellow drink, not going to be nearly as sweet as the previous 2.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you again. First thing, let's do the perfect. Doesn't smell that different. I would say there's a pretty big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it less sweet, more salty?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
What do you think, Kevin?
It is less sweet. It's a little briny.
Oh, I like it.
I might like it better. I like it better.
I like them both. It's not even comparing like brother and sister. It's like comparing cousins, if that makes sense. Like it's like almost different, but still very similar. It's good.
Wait, I'm sorry. Give me the other one too. This definitely smells sweeter. The standard is definitely more syrupy sweet. I don't find the perfect to be that much less sweet. It's just a different consistency to me.
Yeah, it's thinner, isn't it?
Yeah, it is thinner.
It's thinner.
It's thinner. I don't taste a ton of salt.
No, it's not briny.
Well, I have found my new drink.
Really?
So you're a 75-year-old.
75-year-old man?
Yeah.
Apparently, I have the cocktail palate of a 75-year-old drunken man. I think this adds the complexity we were missing before. Before we were mostly just getting the flavor of whiskey cut by some sweetness, whereas now we're getting a little bit of salt, we're getting a little bit of nuttiness brought out by that briny. I think it's a little better blended.
Okay, now the Manhattan Brixton style.
Vieux Carré.
Yeah.
Looked it up.
He called it the Vieux Carré, and this is something that we will review in full later on.
Okay. This is a primer.
Yeah. So remember this because you'll have it again in about 10 years. Because it's a V.
That's right.
It's near the end. Do you know what? This smells like tea.
Oh, really? Interesting.
I like
Tea
tea.
with lemon?
No, like a peach tea.
And this one, since people at home can't see, our first Manhattan was served in a martini glass, as was the perfect Manhattan, but this Vieux Carré is served in a coupe.
Little
I
roundy.
love that you know the name for that.
I just call that a little roundy.
Oh
That's
boy.
a coupe glass.
Remind me not to let you give me a nickname.
Oh, we already got one for you.
Oh my god, Michael was so full of sass tonight.
Okay. This is not the same thing. And I really like it. So you guys can't have any. What do you think of that?
Yeah. I have like 8 of those.
It's a little.
But I've got a lot of us.
You know what? There's a little tartness to it. It's good. It's really good.
It smells different. It does smell like tea. That is weird. It's very different. It's good. I mean, these
Pass
are
it
good
down.
too.
Their eyeballs
No,
are
I want
bugging
some
out.
more. What flavors are you getting, Ray? Besides cousins.
And tea.
There's a tartness to it. Anything a little
There's some tartness. There's more sweetness for sure.
It masks. There's
A little
less.
fruitiness.
Yeah, there's less whiskey flavor.
Yeah, the whiskey flavor isn't the first thing you get. The first thing you get is just yummy.
Cognac, perhaps?
It might be cognac.
No, it's the cognac.
It's
I bet.
yummy.
Yeah.
Totally smells like tea. I don't get much tartness. I get sweet. I like it. I agree, it does not taste anything like these other things.
No.
Well, not anything, but not in the same realm.
See,
Nicole's
she
got the
thinks
squinchy face.
Yeah, she thinks it's too sweet.
I want my perfect Manhattan back.
Yeah, she thinks it's too sweet.
It's sweet with like hints of gasoline a little bit.
What?
No.
What are you talking about?
No, this drink was lovingly made by Michael. There's no hints of gasoline.
Not like Scotch gasoline, because that's real bad. But yeah, like the very last flavor I'm getting is kind of
Scotchaline.
Scotch. Yeah.
So we had the regular Manhattan, we had a perfect Manhattan, and then we had a Brixton Manhattan. A version called the Vieux Carré. And like I said, we'll explore more of the history and the background on that one at a later time. I think that we have tasted everything.
All of the things.
We have tasted all of the things. I think we can wrap this up. Would you have another one of these, Kevin? Would you order a Manhattan?
I don't think I would order it.
You've got other things you'd rather order.
Yeah, but I enjoy it.
If you could only have cocktails, though.
If I could only have cocktails, I'd probably go with like a gin drink maybe.
Okay.
And I like bourbon and whiskey and rye and stuff, but for some reason for cocktails,
It's not a go-to for you.
No, it wouldn't be.
How about you, Rachel?
I think depending on the mood, this could be a go-to. Like if you were going to someplace, like if you came to the Brixton where we are now for the first time, you could look at their cocktail list, which is really, really great. They've got a lot of original cool things on it. And my first instinct would be to order something from there. But if I went someplace and I was like feeling like I was like, I just need a drink. I want something I know is gonna be good. I don't want anything, no frills. I just want an honest-to-God cocktail. I'd order this for sure. Yeah.
This, or if you're like hanging around with buddies and smoking lots of cigars, and you know, if you're packing heat, then yeah, I think a Manhattan's also good. How about you, Bethany? Is this a go-to?
Well, I don't know. Generally, so I think we've had discussions not on the podcast about, you know, what is the best drink that you can get at a bar that you're not familiar with? What's something that's not going to get screwed up, right? Like
Okay.
my go-to drink used to be a whiskey sour, but holy crap, that can taste awful depending where you go. So in that scenario, I would consider ordering a Manhattan at a bar where there isn't a great beer selection. It looks like they have okay liquor.
Yeah.
I might consider ordering a Manhattan.
I agree with that.
If I come to a bar like this, no. I mean, I have other options. But if I'm looking for something that can't be really screwed up, this seems like a good option. Well, if I was invited to a birthday party in like the Gold Coast, and I don't trust any of that shit, I will drink this.
That's a good, yeah.
Okay, so our Manhattan lover, Nicole, what did you think of these Manhattans?
I liked this a lot. With that Luxardo cherry, it's almost got like a cinnamon aftertaste to it too.
I guess with that, I think we can wrap it up. We've bent your ear long enough. Keep listening. There's a lot more to come. Until next time, bye now.
I never roam away from home without a parting tear. My home's New York, Manhattan Isle. You thought I lived down here. Not on your life, just ask my wife. She'll tell you
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to the Monster in a Glass podcast. I'd like to thank Jason Kruse for researching our content, our regular tasting team, Rachel Rubin, Kevin Ratajczyk, Bethany Lang, and Nicole Pizzini, for joining me in the grueling task of tasting the cocktails we discuss. The Brixton and their bartender, Michael Donnelly, for letting us cavort in their liquid playground, Dan Kruse for art direction and editing, and Mark Piani for the music at the head of the show. Go to blackliverproject.com to see the show archive, become a member, contribute to the project, and get in touch with us. And follow us on Facebook and Twitter to get the latest news and as it happens updates during live events. And as always, if you're into thinking and drinking, let us blacken your liver.